Guys, I'm Praveen. I work at Wednesday Solutions, and today I'll be speaking about automating accessibility testing for your component library. Okay, firstly, let's look at what are the things that we'll be covering today. Firstly, what and why of web accessibility. When should you consider accessibility? What and why of Storybook? Why Storybook for web accessibility? How to include accessibility in your component library? What Storybook ALY add-on doesn't do? Comparing ALY add-on with Lighthouse for accessibility. And then best practices for developers to follow to build accessible applications. Okay, what is web accessibility? Building applications that are usable for all. So what do I mean by that? So anyone who comes to your platform, right, no matter whether they are disabled or they don't have any kind of issues, they must be able to use the application just like anyone else would be able to do it. So basically the person next to me, right, should be able to do exactly the same things that I should do. So to build web applications that are accessible, you should make sure that your applications are easily readable by screen readers. Your screen readers should be able to understand what your application is asking it to read. Okay. So, okay, why web accessibility? I've heard this lot from a lot of people. When I ask them, do you think accessibility is important? The immediate thing that they tell no is, no, man, I think accessibility is not important. Why would I even have people with disabilities coming and using my applications? That's never going to be a situation, right? So I just tell them this scenario. So let's look at hospitals in the past. Initially, right, if you looked at how hospitals were built, there were just staircases. You didn't have these slopes where you could slide the wheelchairs on. Just think of this, right? If you didn't have those slides or the slopes to take your wheelchairs, how would it be? If they just thought that, hey, let's not build this. Whoever has some issues, right, could just take the stairs. So if you broke your leg, someone should carry you on the stairs. Can you understand how difficult things are? It's just the same. If you look at things, the people with disabilities, right, the hardware part has evolved a lot over the years. But the applications that can actually be rendered on these screen readers has been very less. It's almost like just 4 to 5% of the web applications today are accessible. So let's look at why web accessibility is very important. More customers. So if you look today, right, building applications has become very easy. There's not a lot of things, right? If you look at the differentiator is on terms of user experience, building it for scale, all of these. But otherwise, you don't have like a real competitive edge if you're just trying to build the same thing as your competitor. So this gives you an edge. According to WHO, about 15% of your 15% of the users, right, have some kind of disability. That is like 1 billion people. The number is insane. So it gives you an opportunity to serve 15% of this population. Secondly, compliance and legislation. So there are so many rules across the globes, and certain countries are very particular about having web applications that are accessible. So if you're not compliant with these applications, right, eventually you'll have to pay a lot of fines, and then it can negatively impact your brand. Thirdly, search engine optimization. So your search engines, right, are optimizing for web applications. So if your application is accessible, so you will eventually be ranking higher in the search. This also gives you a competitive edge. And then finally, promotes usability. So let's take this example where a woman with a newborn baby is holding this baby, and then she wants to book something. Can you imagine how difficult it's going to be to like go through the things, end the flow? Instead, if you just had something for voice, right, you could just tell what it has to do, and then you could just do the flow. So that is also an accessible feature. So it is not only for people with disabilities that your accessible application is going to help, but it's also for people like old peoples, people in developing countries who do not understand the language, and so on. Okay, when should you consider accessibility? I have dealt with few clients. So whenever I go to a client, right, and I tell them, hey, accessibility is important, the first thing that they tell you is, dude, we don't have time for accessibility. So this is not something that we should be thinking of it. First, let's build an MVP out, and then maybe, and then also they're not convinced, to be honest. They're like, no, because there is a lot of time associated to it. That is what they think. But what I think, right, or what I would suggest is accessibility should be included from the very start. Firstly, right, what you can do is you just cover the basic things like your ARIA attributes, your color contrast, your font sizes. If you just cover all of these, right, it covers to about like 60% of your accessibility issues. And then based on whether your application is required to be accessible or you have your MVP in priority, what you can do is you can just go on to build your MVP. And then because you've already built a platform where your application is about 60% accessible, right, it becomes easy to take things from there. And then you can just go and fix the rest as your product grows. So again, coming back to the point, you should be doing it from the start, but if it is really hard, right, setting up these things like your ARIA attributes, fixing those color contrast, all of these are like really small things, but it will definitely help you a lot in terms of SEO and other things. Okay, what is Storybook? So to just give you a brief, I'll be using Storybook to show you how to automate your accessibility testing. So Storybook is an open source project that allows you to document, view, test, do everything in isolation. You can basically build a component, all the variations that you can see the component in, and then you can also test these components all in an isolated environment. Okay, it comes with add-ons that will help with viewport testing, unit testing, accessibility testing, interaction testing, and so on. Okay, why Storybook? Makes it easy to build components in isolation, just like I told you, right? Let's say if you had to build all your components, mark them, test them in your application, you'll be writing tons of things. There are a lot of things at a single place, right? So it becomes easy for you to like exactly see where what is written, and then it becomes also difficult to handle. So what you could do is you could just build all these components in isolation. So anyone in a team, right, could just go to that application, see what that application, what are the components in that application, what are the different things that the components do, and so on. Secondly, increases developer awareness of existing components. So we all have faced this issue, right? Let's say you're a new developer who just got onboarded to a project, and if I asked you to build something, right, it's very difficult for you to understand whether these components are already built. Maybe can I pass some props and then try to tweak these components, or should I build these components from scratch? So if you don't have something that is documented, right, it becomes very difficult for you to like actually go and look at these things. So you may be wasting your time creating something that is already there. You could just tweak the props a little bit and then it could handle your scenarios. So having this, right, gives you a sense of the exact things that are present and whether you'll have to create something on your own or you could just use something that is already there. Thirdly, serves as a living style guide and documentation. So if you have something in Storybook, right, let's say you try to go and play around with Storybook, pass the different props, see different scenarios, right? When you import it and use it in your application, it's just going to be the same. Like even you have like different things in Storybook. I'll just show you the different things in a moment. But yeah, whatever you have in Storybook is what your application look like when it imports those components. Then it makes it very easy to test these scenarios. So because you're having these in an isolated environment, you can write your assertions, you can do interaction testing, you can basically test everything, all states that a component can render in, and it becomes very easy. Okay, why Storybook for accessibility? I think maybe if someone has built accessible applications, you guys must be using Lighthouse as your first line of QA defense. But today I'm going to defend why Storybook is a better choice. Storybook's ALY add-on, that is the add-on that is going to help you do the accessibility testing automatically. So it helps developers provide or basically offer various linting and code analysis capabilities to detect highly potential accessibility issues. It helps to like be your first line of QA defense. So let's understand now why Storybook is important or how is it better than the existing ones. It's simple and easy to integrate. You just need few minutes and you're done. It's that easy. Component level violations. Most of the modern tools today perform page level violations. So what I mean by that is, now let's say, for example, if you have to make an application accessible, what you'll do is you'll first build your component library and then you will import those components. And then if you're using Lighthouse, you'll try to run your accessibility audits at a page level. And then it'll tell you, hey, these are the issues. And then you'll go back to your component library, update those components, bump up the version, bring it back, integrate it again, and then again check for things, right? The feedback loop is like really long. So what we are trying to do here is with the ALY add-on, because you're trying to do component-driven development, you're trying to isolate all your components, and then you're also writing stories. So stories are nothing but the different states your component can render in. Basically, the different scenarios that your component can be in. So what happens is when you're trying to do all of these things, right? If you're just trying to do the audits on a component level, you just build your component library, use ALY add-on. It does automatic accessibility audits, and then it will immediately tell you what are the things that are not accessible, right? Or what are the things that are missing. You immediately get to see it, fix it there, and then once you're done with the component library, you can come back to your application, right? Now there are no pieces where you'll have to again test for accessibility for these components on your application, because I've already tested. The feedback loop is like very small. And then thirdly, it gives you great feedback. It provides you certain tags that tells you the severity of issues. So there are some tags that will tell you, hey, this is very critical. So it is very important for you to like fix it at the moment, right? You can't like try to postpone this. And also maybe let's say if you have an application and you're trying to make that application accessible. So what you can see is from the severity tags, you'll get to know the criticality of these issues, and then you can maybe prioritize as to which one you can fix and which one you can maybe look at later in the flow. And also it gives you resources and links. Let's say if it is giving you some kind of violation, what it does is it gives you relevant links. And then all that you have to do is you just have to click those links. It'll take you to a place where it'll exactly tell you what this issue is exactly about, how to fix it, what you can do with examples. So basically the learning curve is like very less. You have everything out of the box. You go see, just bring those knowledge and then try to implement it in your component library. Okay, flexibility to choose your rules. I don't think this thing, right, is there in your other modern tools. So what happens, right? Let's say there are certain rules. There are different levels of accessibility that you would want to be compliant to, right? There is like AA, AAA, AA, and A levels of accessibility. Let's say there are certain things that you don't want. Maybe you're just trying to optimize your application for the basic level of accessibility. Then what you could do, right? You could just set up these rules, which will tell you, okay, you don't want these rules to be in the accessibility audits. You can just fill in those rules, and then when the audit is happening, right, it will not take those rules into consideration. So it is not like if you want to have like a level of compliance, it won't be like it'll ask you, it'll keep throwing that error that telling that, hey, this is not accessible. You know that you would not need that at this point of time. So having these rules, right, gives you the flexibility to actually ignore them. Automation. So this is like the most important thing. You do not want to manually test things, right? It's very hard. It's frustrating for developers. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to automate using Storybook. So what it does is all that you have to do is you have to write your stories, and then you just have to integrate this add-on, and it'll automatically try to give you all the accessibility issues. So what it does under the hood is it goes into each story, and then it tries to run accessibility audits against that story, and then it'll give you the different accessibility issues for those stories. And also, right, let's say there are different developers working on a project, and you're really scared, right? Whether maybe you are trying to do the best of your ability to like actually make the application accessible, but you feel that maybe someone is not looking at it. Maybe the person who's working in a team, right, is not looking at these issues. So what you can do is you can just set a process where you try to integrate this into your CI pipeline. So anyone who's raising a PR, right, this accessibility checks will run for everyone, no matter who's raising it. And then it'll immediately tell you, okay, the person who's raised this PR has these accessibility issues. So these are the things that you'll have to fix. And also you'll make sure that everyone in a team, right, are following the same standards. Then it has a color blindness emulator. So I'll just show it to you in a bit. So it has this emulator where it tells you the different people with disabilities, right? For example, color blindness and different other issues. So it helps you build this empathy. With this, what happens, right? It helps you see at things in ways that you wouldn't have been possible to see. For example, how could you see from the eyes of a person with color blindness, right? So with these emulators, it actually mimics the environment. It tells you, okay, this is how it will actually look. And then it tries to build you this empathy where you'll understand, okay, this is how difficult it is. So I'll have to like really pay some attention. And also it gives you the percentage against these issues, right? I'll just show you. Okay. Yeah, okay. Basically, so I'm not able to find it. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I found it finally. Yeah, so it basically gives these emulators, right? So you look at blood vision. So if I click on this, right, you see the environment as to how it look when someone with the blood vision comes and views it. It also gives you like different percentages of it, right? It tells you, okay, this thing is like 22.9% of users are usually coming to a platform are having this kind of issues. So also other things, let's say I do this, right, and different issues. So it just gives you, it tries to mimic the environment. So this helps you build empathy and also tries to optimize your platform better. Okay, how do you include accessibility in your component library? So we'll be looking at different things that you'll have to do. Let's say you're starting to build a component library, right? How do you start? Where do you start? What do you do? How do you make your application accessible? Firstly, right, setting up Storybook. So I'll just show you how do you set up Storybook. Okay. So first thing you do is you install your Storybook. Okay. So there are these three files, main.js. This is where your main configuration goes. So you write all your configuration. If you're using Webpack or any other bundler, you try to write the bundler configurations for it as well. And this is your main configuration. This is what helps you build your Storybook build. And then there is this preview file. So this preview file is something that helps you decorate things. Let's say you want to add some parameters at a global level, right? You can come here and define all these parameters. So what it does is these parameters will be running against all your stories. So this is what your preview is. Preview head.html is, let's say you want to inject something to your head of the preview file or HTML file. You'll be able to do it by defining them here. Okay, so this is your setting up Storybook. Now, how do you integrate ALY add-on to pinpoint component level violation? So this is the second thing. So as soon as you have set up Storybook, next thing is, as I told you, you should have a ALY add-on. So this is the accessibility add-on that will help you audit violations at a component level. So all that you'll have to do is, it's very simple. So you just have to install the ALY add-on. That's all. And then you'll have to come and reference it in your add-ons file, as I've done here. That's all. It's that easy. And then you'll see the magic now. So if I go to components, right, you see this accessibility here. It tells you the different violations. It tells you what has passed, what is incomplete. So let me explain these fields, right, or these tabs. So violations are definitely like the name goes. Violations are something where it tells you the different violations. And then the passes are different things it is passed. So what happens is, let's say you want to learn about something through this, right? What you can do is you can just go through the thing. Maybe you want to see something that passed, and you want to see where exactly it's passing, right? So there is this highlights results here. So when you try to highlight, right, it tries to highlight in the exact DOM. Maybe I'll try to use like a more complicated scenario. So I try to do this, right? It just identifies which is this part, right? And then shows you. So you'll exactly know, okay, which was the thing that passed here. So in terms of violations, okay, it tells that elements must have sufficient color contrast, right? So you could just see this now. If I do this, right, it'll tell you where exactly the color contrast issue is. So it becomes very easy for you to like debug things. It helps you identify things faster, thereby reducing the time it takes for you to like actually be compliant to build accessible applications. And then, right, yeah, that's about it. But okay, we were also discussing about feedback, right, earlier, where I was telling you Storybook helps you give great feedback. So this is what I was referring to. This is your severity tags that I was telling earlier. So it tells you serious, right? There are some issues that are critical, something are normal. So it helps you understand how difficult or how critical this issue is. So let's say if you want to know something about the issue, all that you'll have to do is you just have to click this. It opens this up, the DQ University, and then it tells you how to fix the problem. First, it lists out the exact problem. Okay, text elements must have sufficient color contrast against the background. So it tells you why this is important. Ensure all text elements have sufficient contrast between the text and the background color behind it. And then it gives you different things to play around with. And then it tells you why it matters. Some people with low vision experience low contrast. meaning that there aren't very many bright or dark areas, right? So they'll have some issues. So it gives you everything. All that you'll have to do is you just have to use the links, go learn about things, see what is missing in your application, come back and fix it. It's that simple. And then thirdly, write all possible stories for components in a user's journey. This is very important. Your entire accessibility audits, right, depends on this. Whether you want to build things or maybe audit things at the same level of Lighthouse, or do you want to go a step more and then try to do it at like in an in-depth fashion is what the stories here do. So let's understand what stories are. Just like what I told before, stories are basically different states your component can be in. Different, let's say for example, there's a button component, right? And you're passing some props, maybe primary. Okay, so it gives you a button with a different color. Then you try to pass secondary, it gives you a button with a different color. So you'll have to write all possible stories for that button component. If you just wrote a single button component, right, where you were thinking that, okay, if I just write a single button component and not expose the states, then the accessibility audits will not happen to the level you would expect to happen. I'll just show you in an example. So there is this button component. There is primary, right? Like if you look at the primary button, this is exactly the same button. I'm using the same button, passing the props, and then based on the props, the button is rendered. So this is like a primary button, and then it shows no violations. Let's say I go to secondary button, right? It's the same button component, but it's showing me violations. So that is why writing stories are important. Maybe the color contrast for your primary button was good, but your secondary button wasn't. So whenever you're trying to write stories, make sure that you write all possible stories for a component. If you have a button, write all the stories for a button, different states the button can be rendered in. So if you're able to do this, right, what happens is you're trying to mimic this, mimic all the components that your application will basically render. So if you have an application that can render like different variations of button, if you're trying to list out all these buttons, what eventually happens is you have already tested for accessibility of these things. And when you're trying to integrate it into your application, it becomes very easy for your application. You don't have to like go to your application and do all these things over again. So that is the importance of writing all possible stories. Okay, write interaction tests for all possible scenarios and test accessibility for them. So, okay, so we'll have to write all interaction testing. We'll have to do interaction testing. I'll just show you with an example. So here, right, if you look at the thing, I have a default input, okay, where I have violations, passes, and incomplete. Now, let's say if your validation failed, you are throwing out an error message. Is this error message accessible? So to mimic this, right, you should actually try to enter something onto your input box. So it gives you options to do this. So here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to like first reference the Storybook DOM. And then I'm trying to tell, okay, first find the URL input, try to add something to the input, and then check if this input is valid or no. And then it tells you, okay, you can write all these assertions and then exactly know whether this is accessible or no. With this, what happens, right? You can also mock your server responses. Let's say in the example below, I'm trying to make a post request. What I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to mock it and then throw a 401. So you'll understand how will the failed scenarios render. So you will be able to like even test these things with your Lighthouse or any other things, right? You're just basically testing what is rendered on the screen. Whereas with your storybooks, if you're writing stories and then setting up interaction text, you'll be able to like test everything that a user can do, even the user flows. And then automate to catch regressions in the CI, just like how I mentioned, right? It's important. So it's very easy to do it. So I already have this, right? I'll just run it again. So I just have to do yarn test storybook. I have a script that tries to use the test runner, and then I'll just explain what the test runner does. So test runner here, there is something like pre-render. So before each story renders, right, you'll have to inject the axe to the story. Axe is what helps you audit for accessibility issues. And then on post render, after you're rendering, right, what I'm trying to tell is based on the rules that I've said, take all those rules into consideration and then try to give me a detailed report as to like what exactly is happening. So if you're able to like just add this command onto your CI, you'll be able to like identify the different accessibility issues. So it's just running. So you'll see that 6 failed and 1 passed, right? So you'll get to know like Okay, if another developer is also working on the project, you'll get to know when this person is raising a PR. It'll try to run regressions across the platform and then give the issues out. Okay, what ALY addon doesn't do, ALY addon is not a complete replacement for your accessibility testing. It tries to just audit like 57%. That is what they do, but that is still a great number. So with this, what happens is you just don't have to like manually test for this 57%. Rather, Storybook does it for you, and the rest, right? You just have to manually test them. Now, comparing ALY addon with Lighthouse, if you look at the engine that both the Storybook and the Lighthouse uses, right, it's the same. But what makes Storybook powerful is the ability to let you document all the different stories that your screen may not render also. So with this, what happens is you're able to like pinpoint these violations at a component level, and then it shortens the feedback loop. Whereas with Lighthouse, you'll have to like, just like how I told, you'll have to complete your component library, integrate it, and then get to know about the accessibility issues, and then go back and fix them, longer feedback loops. Yeah, that's about it. Okay, then best practices for developers to follow to build accessible applications. So if you are building an accessible application, first start with your component library. Your entire application is composed of components. If you are able to like test the accessibility of these components, eventually, right, it's easy to make your application accessible. So first, write and document all possible stories for a component, write interaction tests, and for all possible scenarios, just like I told, right, mock your server responses, test different scenarios, and then test the accessibility for them. Track and fix violations as you build. So don't wait for you to like raise the PR. Rather, go use the ALY add-on, look at different things in the add-on, and then fix them. Set up accessibility testing in your CI. This is very important, as I told you. So this helps the entire team to follow the same process, same standards, etc. Okay, if accessibility is a priority, right, manually test your components with assistive devices like your screen readers to make them completely accessible. Or if your client is like, no, I just want to ship my MVP now faster, right? And if you're not able to like convince him, start with covering all your basic roles, and then you can do it like as your product grows. For your application, set up accessibility testing in your CI to again catch regressions at a page level. You can maybe use Lighthouse. Lighthouse is still useful here. If accessibility is a priority, then again, just like what I told before. Yeah, so these are the key takeaways. We learned about accessibility and its importance, Storybook and its importance, automating accessibility testing using Storybook, how Storybook's ALY add-on is better than other tools for component libraries, best practices for developers to follow to build accessible applications. Thank you guys for your time.